Hello and welcome to another episode of Law Simplified. I am your podcast host, Sarah Casey, and today I'm joined by another fantastic guest here at Law Simplified. Now, today's episode is like no other. It is bolder with striking and conspicuous view into the English legal system. So I must warn you, this episode is not for the faint-hearted aspiring barristers. Now, to make our episode more thrilling, we have the criminal and regulatory barrister from Drystone Chambers with us today, Ahmed Muen. Ahmed, hello and welcome to Law Simplified. How are you doing today?
Hi, Sarah. I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for being here. Now, our podcast listeners, Ahmed is a 9-year core barrister. He was called to the bar in 2014, had a conventional route to the bar after completing his LLB and completing the bar course. He then obtained pupillage and is now a practising barrister. He is the president and the founder of Arab Lawyers Association, which I can proudly say I'm a member of. And as part of his other memberships, Ahmed is an active member of the Criminal Lawyers Association. Ahmed, thank you so much for being here again. We are so thrilled to have you here, and we cannot wait for you to unravel the truth from you about the profession. Now, we have a lot to talk about, so let us crack on. We want to talk about the profession itself, and rather than addressing your journey to the bar and why you chose to become a barrister, we want you to tell us what it is really like to be practicing as a barrister, especially in the first couple of years. So we want you to tell us about your first days on court, and what they were like, what were the challenges, and if you had to do it again, what would you change?
I think probably my perception, because there's a sort of glamour to the criminal bar, right? Where you think that you're going to be in the Old Bailey and you're going to have the wig and gown. But obviously in your first couple of years, you're not going to be doing stuff like that. You're going to be going to Willesden Magistrates Court, which is a great place, but it doesn't have the same sort of ambiance that the Crown Courts have. So you're going to be traveling a lot. You're going to be going to magistrates courts. You're going to be doing cases that perhaps you don't find that interesting at the beginning. And it's tough, especially in the first couple of years, because you have to build your practice. You have to start to build your client base in terms of your professional solicitors. And it's very, very difficult. And it all comes back to legal aid and the funding of it. And I think it's a sharp shock for a lot of people. And it's unfortunate that a lot of junior barristers do leave and go into other areas of law or go in-house. And we're seeing that now. I mean, the amount of criminal barristers around at the junior end is so low that it's getting to the point where we're showing up for cases and there isn't someone to prosecute it or there isn't someone to defend it, and it's having to be adjourned off. It is tough. It's a very rewarding profession. But believe me when I tell you that I've been, in the corners of Wales at some magistrates court, sitting around for 3-4 hours, getting paid £90 on legal aid. At that point, you sit there and you think, oh, can I do this forever? But it does get better. You have to go through those challenging moments and those difficult moments to eventually start to have a practice that you care about and that rewards you a bit more financially.
Yeah. And we will talk about commuting and we will talk about other information that you've already touched upon. But tell us about the first couple of days on your feet in court. I mean, we all know, well, we anticipate how difficult it will be, but the reality of it, what was it like?
My first day in court, I went to High Wycombe Magistrates Court, and it was a drugs case that basically was just being sent to the Crown Court. So all he had to do, the defendant had to identify himself. The prosecution would then say to the magistrates, this should go to the Crown Court. And then I should usually just say yes and nothing more, and it will be sent to the Crown Court. When the bench asked me if I had any representations, I stood up for about 20 minutes, went on about the defense and how this was a conspiracy by the police and the client was not guilty and his family were going to do this and that, and started pointing out all the evidence. And then the magistrate said to me, yes, thank you, Mr. Muen, but do you have any representations on the Crown Court? And I was like, no. And she went, thank you. So I just basically made a fool of myself, but it was quite, it's quite an inspiring moment. I remember the client being like, wow, this guy really cares about this case and stuff. So it's terrifying for you. Of course, the first time on your feet, it don't matter how many times you'll sit in court and watch it, it's terrifying. But being thrown in at the deep end is good. And then obviously, you're doing very simple hearings at the beginning. You're doing trials in the magistrates' courts.
Yeah.
And then my first time in the Crown Court, again, was sort of just for a mention hearing. But again, I was terrified because I thought to myself, I'm going to get held in contempt. The judge is going to call my head of chambers. I'm going to do something stupid. And it takes a long time to sort of feel comfortable.
Yeah, I guess we always expect the worst case scenario, that we're going to throw it all out of the window.
Yeah, it's going to be like the front page of the Daily Mail, like barrister, shames himself and his chambers. So that anxiety, especially when you're in your junior first few months or whatever, that anxiety is what makes sure that you're prepared and you know what you're doing, and the fear of looking stupid so much, especially for me, which is quite common. You tend to make sure you're prepared and you know the case inside out.
Yeah, I guess it's confidence in that it will all be okay. And another thing that a lot of barristers have told me is that you fake it till you make it.
Still doing that.
Excellent. Now we're going to move on now to similar topic, which is the misconceptions of the job. So we have, especially as aspiring barristers, have a vague idea of the whole profession compared to what the actual job is and its realities. So let us address the elephant in the room, and that is the pay. It's a topic that barristers rarely address and ultimately just gives a false impression to aspiring barristers, and sometimes, in fact, leaving them completely blind to this matter. So to ask you as a criminal barrister, is it true that the criminal bar, is it true that it doesn't pay, that it is dire?
I thought you were going to ask me my salary then. I thought you were going to say, how much do you make, Ahmed? Look, it's tough at the criminal bar, and legal aid has been hammered for the past, since way before I was at the bar. And the government has underfunded the whole system to the point where it can be dire. In the magistrates' courts, it's dire. Doing a whole day trial for £150, if you even get that, is not appropriate for a junior barrister, especially after, if you'll be doing those trials after you've finished the bar in uni. So most people will have a lot of debt.
Yeah.
It's not like London is the cheapest place to live. There are cases that pay very well. You can earn a good living at the bar. It depends what your version of good is, but you can make a good living. You're never going to make what people at the commercial bar or shipping barristers or banking lawyers make, but you can make a good living. The difficulty is it's quite exhausting. So if you're the highest paid case for somebody of my sort of level call would be something like a junior brief, which is where you're being led by somebody, and it'll be quite long. It might be a couple months or 3 months, and then you're getting a daily fee for attending court. So you're getting what we call a refresher. There'll also be a brief fee, so you get that fee for accepting the case. The brief fee depends on various different categorizations of either offences or page count. So usually the highest brief fee for somebody of my call would be something like a large scale fraud with a large amount of pages. The difficulty is that there's not a lot of that work around. Yeah. It's obviously a lot of competition for that work, and it is quite exhausting. So if you're doing 2 or 3 junior briefs back to back, you're usually going to be doing a lot of work and going through a lot of evidence and traveling somewhere. And so, yes, it is good money, but it is a lot of work. And there's a misconception as well, because I remember when I joined the bar, I thought, yeah, I don't mind traveling. Like, it's great, it's glamorous. You think, I'll get the first class train and I'll go to this place. But you have to be prepared that you're going to go to some places really far away. Yeah. You're going to have to get the 6 a.m. trains. You might have to go the day before. Staying in hotels is a nice idea, but as you know, Sarah, some of the hotels I stayed in recently in Brighton was a joke. Because as well, sometimes you get your travel and your hotels paid for, or you get a certain amount per day. You get about £55 per day from legal aid. A lot of the time you don't get your travel and your hotel's paid for. So you have to pay that out of your own pocket. And when you're staying somewhere for 3 months, you can't be staying in the Hilton or the Sheraton. You have to find somewhere budget.
Yeah.
For me, myself, I'm not married. I don't have kids. I don't have a lot of responsibilities. So it's easy for me to go to Cardiff for 3 months, to go to Brighton for 8 weeks, to go to York for 7 weeks. If you have children or you're married, those are things you need to think about in terms of your lifestyle, because it's got to the point now where you go where the good work is. And if that happens to be hundreds of miles away, you have to do it.
Yeah, and I think you've touched on an important point, and well, actually, a couple of important points, and that's commute, which we will discuss literally in the next question, and also the competition at the bar. So, just taking you back to the pays and the criminal barristers' pay, do you have an idea of what the average salary of a criminal barrister is? And then again, you said depending on how junior or senior you are. So does it basically improve over time, the salary you get working as a barrister?
I think it's difficult to give an average salary because it really does depend on the work that you're doing, how much work you do, because obviously you're self-employed. So some people will take more time off. Some people will work flat out all the time. Some people will have very, very successful practices where they are consistently doing high, very serious work or leading briefs. So they're leading people. And some people will have a very strong private practice where they're not reliant so much on legal aid. So it's so difficult to give an average. As you get more and more senior and you do more serious cases, the fees do go up. So you'd imagine that your salary does go up. But also, if you are building a strong client base with your solicitors and they're feeding you more and more work, then naturally your income should rise. As I said, you can make, there's no reason why a junior barrister can't make 6 figures. Obviously, a lot of that goes into chambers expenses and tax, but it's achievable.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess as the chambers you practice at as well has an influence on that, but we won't discuss that, so I'm just raising it. So let's move on to the next question, and also about the misconceptions about the bar. Again, us aspiring barristers know too little about the whole profession because I guess there's not much talk about the pay, for instance. The next one, which you addressed slightly, is the travel. Now, I know, like you said about your commute, and a lot of barristers commute so far and so much. How do you manage? I mean, sometimes you have 4 to 7, at least 4 to 7 weeks trials, living out in hotels. How do you structure that with your social life, and what tips would you provide for aspiring barristers going into this profession?
It is difficult, and like I said earlier, I'm quite lucky that I don't have any responsibilities, so it's easier for me to be able to go away for a long period of time. I think that the best to give you that you need to really think about it, whether it's suitable for you, because there is a lot of travel. It's not as if it's only for the big cases. Things have got better now with CVP, but it used to be where you'd go to Canterbury, you'd travel 2 or 3 hours just to do a 10-minute hearing. Now that CVP is introduced, it's sort of limited that to an extent. But there's very often you have to go in person to a court far away, and your whole day is essentially wasted on one little hearing. In terms of structuring it, it can be very difficult because it depends who you're on with the case. Sometimes you might know some barristers there, and so you might have some friendly people there that you can socialize with, but sometimes there'll be people that you don't know. You have to be quite happy in your own company. And it is tough to live in a hotel for a long time in a city that you don't know or you don't know anybody. That's why I say it's a misconception. I didn't fully appreciate it until I think my first long case was in Norwich, and I was there for about 8 or 9 weeks. But I was very lucky because co-counsel on that case were fantastic, and so we had quite a lot of fun. But there's been cases where I've been on my own for 7, 8 weeks.
Yeah, I understand. But at Law Simplified, we try to simplify legal concepts and the whole profession. So taking you back to CVP, first of all, are you able to just tell us what CVP is? Because I'm not sure what it is.
It's cloud video platform. So basically it's like Zoom. So a lot of courts now are doing hearings over what we call CVP.
Okay.
Which I can't believe it took a pandemic for that to happen, but it's a lot of progress from HMCTS.
Excellent. Thank you, Ahmed. Moving on to HMCT. So we're going to talk about Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Service. Now, we are aware of the lack of funding, the lack of resources, and the frustration of the whole process. But tell us really, what is the reality of it and the implication operationally on the whole justice system from your point of view, because you're in and out of court on a daily basis and you can see it. We hear about it on the news, but on your side is different. So tell us about the realities of those lack of funding.
It's collapsing. And I don't blame HMCTS. It's wholly down to the government, who have underfunded this system for so long, to the point now where if you put some of the things aside, let's forget about the fact that the courtrooms are falling apart. Ceilings are falling down, nothing works. The MOJ spent millions and millions of pounds on this new system called Common Platform, which is supposed to be how we access cases, even though there's nothing wrong with the system that we have at the minute, and this new system doesn't work. They then spent millions of pounds with a new system about how we're supposed to show evidence on a TV screen. Again, the old system worked fine, and this system doesn't really work that well. And it's just continuous all the time that the court systems don't get the funding or the attention that they need. And what you have now is a lack of courtrooms, a lack of judges, a lack of barristers to prosecute or defend cases. And if you put it into perspective, so I had a trial that was scheduled for 4 weeks in Derby. A week before the trial, we were told by the court, be ready to start on Monday with no delay. And this trial was a late return. So I'd received it only a couple of weeks before, and it was about 20,000 pages. So I had prepared it all, ready to go. And there were 6 defendants in the trial, and all 6 barristers were all ready to go. The Friday before the trial starts, we get an email from the court saying, we're not going to start on Monday, but be at court on Monday, we'll start on Tuesday. We get there on Monday, we're left waiting all day. We go back on Tuesday, and we get told, actually, there's no room to hear the case, and it's going to get pushed off until April. So we've all prepared this case. We've all spent money coming down or going up to Derby. I booked a hotel for 2 weeks because it's cheaper, which, maybe I shouldn't have done, but if the court says be ready to start, then you have an assumption that the case is going to go ahead. Thankfully, I was free on the next occasion when it got adjourned to. It's going to happen in April. But 3 of the other barristers were like, we're not available on that day. We have other trials. And so all the work that they've done, they're not going to get paid for.
Wow.
Because unless the case starts, you don't get what's called the brief fee. So for the Monday, we'd get a mention fee, which was probably about £90. And on the Tuesday, when the trial got adjourned, you get what's called a trial stood out fee, which is about £300. So all that effort and prep goes towards nothing. And that isn't even, that's just one example. This happens on a daily basis where counsel have to prepare cases that don't get called on, or they get pulled out of the list at the last minute. I'm supposed to be in Birmingham on Monday to start a really serious trial, a sex case. We were told about 4:30 on Friday, the case hasn't come in. Don't come on Monday. So I don't know if it's going to start on Tuesday. I don't know if it's going to be adjourned off to another day, or it'll start on Wednesday. And in the meantime, I can't take another case on Monday because I don't know if this one is going to start on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And it's, like I said, counsel deal with this all the time. And the government doesn't seem to care enough to actually properly invest in the system. And it's going to collapse. That's why you have junior barristers leaving. That's why you have junior barristers refusing to do work. There's only so much that people can take before they want to be properly paid fairly for work that they've done.
Yeah, and I think a lot of barristers say the same thing. There is not enough judges, there's not enough barristers. But then again, why do you think that is? Why do you think there's not enough judges, or there's not enough, barristers?
Because it's a lack of funding. The government hasn't funded this system ever. Even like now, we're on the verge of a strike, and the government is saying, oh, well, please don't strike, and we will let you know soon enough. We're going to do a consultation. You have a system that worked through the pandemic. You have a backlog of tens of thousands of cases, you're hearing from every corner, we need urgent funding. It's not just for legal aid fees. HMCTS, the court staff, everything down to the magistrates' court, they've been shutting courts since I've been at the bar, but well before then. You can't treat the system like that and expect it to work. You have to fund it properly. And they just haven't been doing that. And eventually now, I think that there is going to be a strike, and it's going to start off with no returns. So barristers refusing to take cases as returns. Whether it goes further than that, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, we will discuss the backlog and obviously the COVID impact in a second, Ahmed. But to just continue on that point, you mentioned slightly, you said the profession is aging. Now, I know you're a 9 years core barrister, but you get involved in very complex cases. So I know it's rewarding for you, but it may also be intimidating, I guess. So why do you think the profession is aging and it's difficult to stay in these cases?
Well, if you're a junior barrister and you're traveling around and you're doing all the work that you do and you're preparing cases, I mean, honestly, when I explain to people sometimes that I have to read 20,000 pages on a case, they're like, that sounds like a lot. It is a lot. Yeah. Even if it's stone evidence or it's cell site or it's stuff that's very sort of dull and that you have to take in, you have to dedicate quite a lot of time to that. Time management is so important. And then to find out that that case has been moved into a time where you can't do it. So everything, all the work that you've done on the case is basically not going to get paid for. You've drafted a defense case statement where you've gone through all the unused material and you've spent hours doing that. You don't get paid for any of that. And then you see colleagues of yours who do civil, or they're in-house and they have a salary and they have a pension and they have holiday pay and they have sick pay. I understand why people would think, I'm going to take that job instead because it's less hassle and stressful. Obviously, for me, I quite enjoy being self-employed. I don't really find other areas of law that interesting, so I have to stay at the criminal bar. But I can appreciate why a lot of people say, I'm not going to do this anymore.
Yeah, it's becoming difficult, and especially with COVID and the backlog, which I'll address now. Now, you are also an active member of the Criminal Bar Association, and we can see on the news, on legal Twitter and across social media, the impact of the cases, especially after COVID and the backlog that it has caused. So you said there's going to be a strike. I mean, my question to you is, what do you think will happen because of this backlog? Is it 100% there's going to be a strike? What are your thoughts on this?
I don't know. There's a ballot for action. So the CBA have asked all criminal barristers to vote on whether they want to take action or not. And I think the results come out on Monday. So we'll see. I'd be very, very surprised if there wasn't a resounding call for action, because a lot of people are annoyed. But the weird thing is the backlog, it was bad before COVID. It wasn't just caused by what happened with the pandemic. You're now going to hearings where a client's pleading not guilty. And there's one particular court which is notorious for this, where they're like, okay, we'll set the trial date, September 2023. And they're like, is that convenient? And you're thinking, I don't even know if I'm going to be alive by that time. Like, come on. And the weird thing is that the court will then say, okay, the trial's in 2 years or whatever. Can you get defense case statements in within 2 months? Can you do a certificate for trial readiness? And you're thinking, I'm not even going to think about this case for the next 2 years. Like, what's the point? But it was bad before. It's gotten worse since the pandemic happened. But yeah, there's a lack of courtrooms, there's a lack of counsel, and like I said earlier, if you continue to underfund the system, then it's not going to get any better. I don't know what the outcome will be if there's a strike. I hope the government, although I'm not very confident on given what Dominic Raab's been saying recently, will listen and come to the table and realize what everyone is putting into the system. And it's not just us, not council, it's everybody.
Yeah.
Whether that happens or not, I'm out for Mr. Raab.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think one of the solutions is CVP? Is that one of them, to go on virtual hearings? Is that one of the solutions to solve the backlog?
You can't do it for everything. So you can do it, and it's being used now the Lord Chief Justice sent out guidance where it's thankfully now being used a lot more than it was. So for things that are mentioned hearings and straightforward, then CVP is being used. Some courts are still being quite difficult about it, but most, thankfully, are using it more and more. You can't use it for everything. So for things like sentences, you kind of need to be there, unless it's a very sort of straightforward sentence where the imprisonment is certainly not an option. But those kind of hearings aren't the things that are really backing up the system. It's the trials, and it's specifically the custody trials. And you can't have trials over CVP. You need to be there in person and have the jury all there. So whilst it helps clear out some of the backlog in terms of the hearings, it's not going to affect the bulk of it.
Yeah, I agree. Ahmed, I want to ask you about some of the complex cases you've talked about. I want to know about what is the most complex case you've dealt with? And again, as a 9 years core barrister, are you expected to deal with cases that complex that year? I mean, or would it be only when you're a QC dealing with such cases?
I don't think my cases are for a QC, certainly. But I don't know. Look, if you have a practice and your solicitor instructs you on a case, and you know whether you can deal with it or not. If it's something that's too complex for you, then you should say. But I feel after 9 years, you can, you've done most variety of offences apart from murder and terrorism and things like that. That you will have a view of most types of cases. It's difficult because cases can be complex in different ways, whether it's witness issues or a complex defense. In terms of just complexity on the papers, probably there was a fraud that I did last year, which was £34 million, and I was being led on it. That was complex just because it was just so much paperwork, and it was a money laundering that had happened between here and Pakistan, but the money had rerouted in various places, and it was just hard to get your head around the amount of paper and the amount of transactions. And so that makes it complex. But in terms of the issues and what you're dealing with, they're fairly standard. What you're trying to show is that it wasn't criminal property, for example, it's legitimate. So it's not complex in that sense, but the evidence and the volume of it makes it complex.
Amazing. Sounds interesting. I can't wait.
I say it sounds interesting. So listen, you say, this £34 million money laundering sounds very interesting. The funny thing is that we had a mini pupil come and watch the first couple of days of the case, and it was prosecution counsel. No criticism of him, because this is what he had to do, which was go through the banking evidence. So you had 3-4 days of the jury just sitting there going, and this transaction to this bank, and this transaction to this bank, and it was mind-numbing. And you could see everyone be like, and it's not the prosecutor's fault. I mean, you can't make that glamorous, that evidence. It's dull, but you have to go through it. Yeah. But imagine just sitting there hearing it and you're thinking, and I said to the people, like, did you enjoy that? Did you find it interesting? And they said that was the worst case I've ever seen. And I don't think I want to do crime anymore.
Yeah, I mean, let's not talk about that. That's a different issue for the jury, for many people. Let's just focus on what we're talking about today. Ahmed, we're going to move on now to talk about your association, and that is the Arab Lawyers Association. Tell us why you wanted to create and found this organization. What was your theory behind it?
Networking. Wholly down to networking. There was all these great events going on, Society of Asian Lawyers. I went to quite often, and I'd see Arab lawyers there, and then we'd all talk and say there should be something that celebrates and promotes Middle East lawyers, or lawyers who have an interest in working in the Middle East sector. And so I set it up, and it snowballed, and there is obviously a need for it there, and it's worked very, very well.
Yeah, I agree with that. There are no Arab lawyers that I know apart from yourself. Do you think we're underrepresented in the bar?
At the criminal bar, yes.
Yes.
certainly not in solicitors and banking and finance and corporate, but probably the criminal bar.
Yeah.
There's a couple. There's a couple.
There's a few of us, yeah. Now, tell us about the future of the association. What do you have? Do you have a specific vision for this association in the criminal bar, of course?
I would love for it to be useful to students or aspiring barristers or people that worry about how am I going to get pupillage or want advice or even looking to get training contracts. What we did do before was have a lot of events planned, and then the pandemic hit. But part of the events was a sort of meet and greet with people that were in the position to give advice, they've just got training contracts, or they've just got pupillages, and talking to students, etc. Yeah. So we do want to do that, and that will be something that goes forward, because it's not just a networking event for people that are in the profession. I feel like we should also help and give back to people that are looking to break into the profession. I had a lot of help. I mean, I can't imagine where I would be. Probably selling fridges somewhere.
That's not your other, aspiring career, is it?
No, but my mum used to always say to me, every time I didn't do well at school or something, she'd be like, well, what do you want to do? Sell fridges? And I'd be like, actually, it's not such a bad job, Mum. There's worse things out there. But I always think to myself now, like, I could be selling fridges.
Ahmed, you mentioned networking. So I know, and you will obviously know, that network is important. But again, at Law Simplified, we try to simplify things we talk about. So why do you think networking is important for aspiring barristers? Forget those in the profession already, but those for aspiring barristers, why do you think networking is important?
Because it's the difference of walking into a pupillage interview and seeing 3 random faces than walking into a pupillage interview and seeing 2 people that you know and have met previously and have made a good impression of or have asked questions of. That automatically will make you feel a little bit more comfortable that you've had a conversation with this person, because a pupillage interview is very stressful as it is anyway.
Yes.
But if there's a familiar face, you're going to think, oh, okay, well, that's so-and-so, and I've met them at this event. And also, when you're networking, it's important that you ask the questions that you really want proper answers to. Because a career at the bar, first of all, if you've got this far, you've already invested quite a lot financially, emotionally, physically. It's so tough.
Yeah.
So it's important that you know the profession that you're going to get into and you know what to expect. And the best person to tell you that is a criminal barrister. And with all due respect, if someone says to you, the profession is great, it's amazing, there's no bad things, and it's wonderful, and I can't wait for you to do it, then they're not telling you the truth, because no job is like that. I've moaned quite a lot today because we've been talking about specific things. I do love the profession. I can't do anything else. But there are challenges, especially for people that are going to be just qualifying or just finishing a pupillage or 1 or 2 years core. It's a very tough time. But if you've networked and you know people, then at least you'll have a better idea. But also, network with solicitors. I think the most important thing you can do is build your own practice.
Yeah.
And whereby the solicitors call to instruct you, not call to instruct your chambers. That will allow you to build a practice more quicker and to get on to better work and bigger cases. And networking is fundamental to that, because you have to sell yourself.
Yes, I agree. And there's challenges in every profession we go into, and especially at the start. So to kick off your journey, I think networking is fundamental, as you say, 100%. Now, Ahmed, just going back to your Arab Lawyers Association, is there any events that are coming up? Obviously, we want to share that with our podcast listeners and invite those aspiring barristers, obviously, to come and join us at your events. So is there any upcoming events we have planned?
Yes, so there's 2. There's going to be an Arab Lawyers Social, which is going to be like a casual, informal meet and greet. That is being planned for beginning of June. There is also what we have is supporting the Arab Lawyers Forum, which is an international version of our association. And they're holding the annual Arab Lawyers Forum here in London on the 9th and 10th of May. It's been put off because we were supposed to do it in 2020, but the pandemic hit, and then we are only now doing it now. So it's going to be at the Rosewood Hotel, and it's 2 days. It's a fantastic event. It's the biggest event for Arab lawyers or people working in the Middle East sector. So you have lawyers literally coming from all over the world to network. It's a fantastic event. I went to the one in Rome, which was in 2019, and I met so many different people, whereby I thought, okay, we're never going to work together because you're in corporate banking and I'm at the criminal bar. But actually, on the contrary, there's always referrals. There's always things that you can do together. There's always things that you can learn. And these kind of events unlike any other, because where else would you meet, partners from Dubai? So anyone can join up. You don't have to be an Arab. You don't have to be a lawyer as such. You can be someone who's looking or interested in the profession, and it's free. So no reason not to come.
Amazing. And we'll definitely share those information to register as well on our websites. Great, Ahmed. Now we're going to move on to the fun side of things. Now, I know you, as you said, you moaned a lot today. So tell us, where do you see yourself retiring? Where would the location describe to us right now as you're imagining it? Close your eyes, okay? Imagine with us, you're retired. Where do you imagine yourself? Where's the location and what are you doing?
There's book Crown Court, and I'm doing a bench for him. That's what I think will happen. No, you know what? I'd like to go somewhere. I'd like to move to Dubai at some point. I know that's so cliche. I know it's very, very cliche, but I do love it, and it's very metropolitan, and I need to be somewhere warm.
Yeah, I agree. When you said Dubai, in my head I was like cliche, but then again I thought about the heat. Yes, 100%.
It's a great place. I love it. It's one of my favorite places to go, aside from Snaresbrook, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, whether that happens or not, I'm not sure.
I'm sure it will happen. You're a hard worker. Amazing, Ahmed. And now we go to the final question, and that is our most important question. We ask all our guests this question. So, tell us about the funniest moment you had in court.
I mean, every day is pretty much a joke. I remember when I was really, really junior, there's a form that you fill out when a defendant's getting sentenced, and it's called a means form, and it's about their financials and their income. So the court will basically fine them based on how much money they make. And there's a box at the bottom that says any additional income, and my client had written F.A. In there, and I didn't notice it at the time, and I passed it up to the district judge. This was in the magistrates court. This was in Stratford Magistrates Court. And the judge said, "Mr. Muen, what does F.A stand for?" And I thought it stood for fuck all. Because I couldn't think of what F.A would stand for. So I panicked and I said, "Oh, sir, that's just my client in his own colloquial version saying that he doesn't have an income." He said, "Yeah, but what does F.A stand for?" I said, "Sir, he's just in his own little manner saying that he has no income." He said, "Yes, I understand that, Mr. Muen, but what does F.A stand for?" I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to have to say it." So I said, "Sir, it stands for all." And then my client went, "No, actually, it stands for family allowance." I was thinking, why would you write that down? But then obviously that made me look stupid.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Of course you had to think of that. Of course you would think of the bad word.
In my defense, who would think FA stands for anything other than that? No one puts family allowance.
A practicing family barrister?
Probably. Well, there's a difference between family and crime. We're no nonsense on the crime side. We just shoot from the hip. But there's a teachable lesson in that, which is always take full instructions on everything.
There we go. You've got a tip. From all of this funny story, we've got a tip. Our podcast listeners, make sure you make a note of that. Amazing. Yeah. Ahmed, you have been a fantastic guest. This was an exciting episode, and it was full of nuggets we can take on, and make sure our podcast listeners, you make notes of everything Ahmed has given us today. Ahmed, we want to thank you again for your appearance here at Law Simplified. You have truly enlightened us both by your presence and your honesty, as well as your humour. We appreciate that. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to seeing you at the event. I'll make sure the event is posted on our social media. Our podcast listeners, make sure you check out Ahmed Muen's social media. Make sure you follow him on LinkedIn at Ahmed-Muen. And whatever you do, make sure you check us out on all our social media platforms. That is our website at www.law-simplified.co.uk. We are available on all social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Make sure you also check out our TikTok with Ahmed Muen at the end of this podcast. Ahmed, thank you so much for being here. Make sure you check out our podcast as soon as it's downloaded. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your podcast host, Sarah O'Casey. Thank you for listening.